Welcome to the Veganuary Podcast, the podcast that helps you to try a vegan diet. It's stuffed full of hints and tips for anyone who wants to eat more plants. Veganuary 2025 is proudly sponsored by our international sponsor, The Vegetarian Butcher. Check them out, plus details of all our other sponsors in the episode description. So I'm sorry to our regular listeners who might be missing Wendy this week, but joining me as the co-presenter on the podcast today is my colleague Andrew from Veganuary.
Hi, Stu.
And the reason Andrew is here is because we are going to talk today about masculinity, fatherhood and veganism. We expect this episode will go out on Father's Day. And like me, Andrew is a dad of two. So do you want to introduce yourself, Andrew?
Yeah, so I'm Andrew from Veganuary. I'm the video and creative manager there. But yeah, what brings me to this podcast is that I am, like Stu, qualified to talk about masculinity and veganism because I'm a father of two and I'm a vegan.
And a man.
And a man.
Crucially. So we're going to it's like a hot topic at the moment because the Netflix drama Adolescence was released a few months ago. That's kind of got people talking. That's shed some light on the manosphere and Andrew Tate and that sort of thing. Lots of people are talking about that at the moment, and I'm quite interested in how we promote veganism to men and whether we in Veganuary or the vegan movement as a whole does a good job. So we're going to get into some of those issues. But before that, should we talk about what the most vegan thing that's happened to us this week is?
Yes.
Would you like to go first?
I will go first. And listening to this in other episodes, I always think it's kind of challenging, but I do have one this week. So
You haven't had to come up with like 15 of them.
Well, whenever I listen to their podcasts, I'm like, I hear you and Wendy, or when Kim was there, say it, and I'm like, what have I done this week that's been vegan? Has there been anything? But this week there was something. I actually organised a vegan climbing social night at my local bouldering gym.
Wow.
So pretty vegan. I don't want to exclude anyone. Anyone's welcome, I guess. But at the moment, I want to, chat to some like-minded people.
So are these people you knew, or did you like promote this on Facebook? What did you do?
So a Facebook group, the Chorley Vegan Society, I put a shout out. I said, does anyone around here go bouldering? Because it'd be good to have like a vegan meetup. And there was one person who already went to my local gym, but I've never met them. And then there's a couple who go to another local-ish gym, and then someone who'd never tried before. So we've got a little group already ready to go of local vegans to me.
That's very impressive. I think I'd find that really socially awkward. How was it?
Well, it's not happened yet. It's going to be this Friday. I've just organised it.
Oh.
So it's pending. But I've been going to another social climb with just non-vegans, I guess.
Right, just norms.
And I just thought it'd be nice to have a vegan meetup.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. Well, I hope that goes well.
Thank you. How about you?
Well, I'm stealing this one from a colleague. So, I haven't been able to think of any of my own for this week. And we would love people to tell us their funny vegan stories by writing to podcast@veganuary.com. But this is one that my colleague Hannah told me. It seems appropriate for today's episode as well. She has a little girl, I think. Little girl, and apparently she turned around, looked at little girl. What have you got in your mouth? Got her to open her mouth. Just eating a snail that she'd found on the floor. So that was like a vegan fail for Hannah and her family, I think, this week. But that did make me laugh.
That's amazing, like French cuisine.
Yeah. So, shall we get into talking about masculinity? Where do you see yourself on like the masculine scale from beta cook to like alpha dom top?
Probably, probably beta cook more. I don't know. It's complicated.
The scale itself is a bit silly. I mean, I was being slightly glib. In
the middle, I think. I have some masculine tendencies, but I've also rejected traditional masculinity in my path in my life before.
You were telling me about you feel like you have some feelings about your relationship with your father. Do you want to lie down on that sofa and tell me all about them?
We're getting straight into it, are we, Stu? So we were talking about how our fathers have influenced how we parent. And I feel like a lot of the ways I parent is inspired by my father in the way that I want to do the opposite of what he did. So it's kind of like not conventional. But yeah, I felt a lot of anger, impatience. I don't want to get too deep, but like some violence, some negativity, and a lot of toxic masculine traits from him growing up.
Yeah.
So when I was a child and growing older, I would just rebel against that. So like when I was a young teenager, straight away, I didn't want to be associated with the conventional image of a man.
Yeah.
So straight away, grew my hair, and that's stuck. I've still got long hair now. And it wasn't rejecting masculinity itself, but the traditional kind of angry masculinity that I was seeing in what should have been my role models.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't want this to become therapy, but you know, I think positivity has come from that because it's enabled me to be compassionate, to be patient with my son.
Yeah.
So yeah, my daughter is only 5 months, so I don't really have to be patient with her yet. But certainly, yeah, when you're a parent, you have to be patient with your children. So you had a more positive.
Well, that's sort of like the opposite. I would say my dad didn't display many cliche kind of tropes of masculinity at all, really. And we did like lots of things together. So I didn't really feel that pressure to be hyper masculine. Like me and my dad did Morris dancing, as you know. My dad plays folk music. So he wasn't exactly like your typical lager drinking, football attending dad, like some of my friends' dads. But actually, when I was a kid, sometimes I remember wishing he was more like that. Because one thing that I felt as a child was that football, like liking football and knowing about football, was like such an important thing socially in order to fit in with other boys. And I always remember like pretending that I supported Middlesbrough United, and I had a Middlesbrough United kit. Like I convinced my mum and dad to give me a Middlesbrough United kit. And I don't know why, because I find football so boring. And my dad once even took me to see Darlington FC play. I think they were called Darlington FC. And it was really one of the most boring days of my life. I just thought it was rubbish. But I felt like, well, I'm sort of fulfilling this kind of need within me to like be able to talk to other boys about football. And then just linking into this, I have an older sister, and I used to inherit her things, and I inherited her bike with like the crossbar that dips down. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So they can step over it with their skirts.
Exactly. A girl's bike. And I remember like the kids in the neighborhood would say, oh, he's got a girl's bike. So my mum and dad bought me loads of football stickers to like masculinize this bike. I like plastered it with football stickers. So I sort of obviously as a little boy did feel this need to like adopt these masculine traits. But I think by the time I was a teenager, that had gone really. I wasn't really that bothered. Yeah. I'd kind of come to terms with the fact that I thought football was rubbish. I like made some friends that were more into the things that I was interested in, like films and music, where I didn't feel like I needed to do any masculine posturing. What about later as an adult? Have you felt any? Are there times where you feel pressure to adopt like a masculine persona?
I guess being a dad makes you start to feel a little pressure. But generally in my life, I haven't felt that pressure. I haven't felt the need to conform. And I think that has shaped me in a way. But it's funny you saying about your relationship with football, because, yeah, when I was very young, my dad loved football and would be the lager drinking dad. And he would get so angry. And I'd see this from like a distance across the room, probably just reading a book or something, whatever I was doing in my kind of like introspective youth. And it just made me feel like football was just this chaotic, I don't know, misery fest, and I didn't really want to be into it. But I did enjoy playing football.
Right.
You know, I would play it, and I would like to play around with it. But then, same with you. Once I was a teenager, I was like, that's another culture that I don't feel like I can resonate with. And it's weird because it does feel tied to masculinity so much in the UK.
Yeah.
It's just interesting. But yeah, since then, I don't really feel a pressure to be masculine, because I think that the typical conventional wisdom in what masculinity is flawed, and we need to challenge that.
Yeah, I agree. I suppose there have been times, you know, when I was still single and I was doing internet dating, I remember feeling then like a need to project a sort of idea of masculinity that I thought would be more attractive to my, you know, potential partners. So that was one thing. And like, I think probably even now I sort of, you know, I go to the gym and I fantasize about having like the kind of more muscly toned physique, even though in reality, a bit too lazy really to get into that, to do that properly. And then there's things like being in very like masculine spaces. So like a stag do. If you are one of our friends in America and you're listening to this and you don't know what a stag do is, you call it a bachelor party. I sort of dread, if I'm invited to a stag do, I sort of dread it, because I kind of expect that there will be some sort of competitive, masculine thing going on. Actually, often it can relate to food, which is interesting and what we're going to come on to talk about. But there is like a whole thing about, well, who can drink the most beer and who can eat the most meat, who can eat the spiciest food. You get all that sort of stuff at stag do's, don't you? And I just find all that a bit distasteful. I think I'm a bit of a snob when it comes to stuff like that.
And then with stag do's, it's kind of like ridicule is expected, isn't it? It just feels a bit mean in certain ways, which I'm not really comfortable with, and I've never been comfortable with. No. So yeah, it is a weird one.
So then you've already touched on it a bit, but how does then that experience with your dad and then later feed into how you parent Forrest in particular, because Forrest is a boy and Coral's still a little baby. But
yeah. So what I take from my upbringing, it was good. Don't get me wrong. Like I'm not like traumatized for life from it, but it made me aware of what I felt in certain situations. When you're shouted at, when you feel a threat of something, you become. It makes you uncomfortable in your own house, and I don't want that for anyone, especially my children. So it's led me to try and be very mindful of the emotions that I surround Forrest with my children. So I guess it's just making sure that if I'm having a hard day, if I'm going to lose my temper, to just try and be as careful with my words as I can be. And if I do say the wrong thing and upset him and it's over the top, I will just sit down with him and apologize and give him a cuddle. And I think that's something that I never got growing up. I never got an apology for like from a parental figure.
Yeah.
For when, because often it's just like the parent has made a mistake and they're upset and they don't want to admit that mistake. And I think basically my upbringing has shown, it's taught me that I need to be mindful of when I make a mistake. I need to own up to it and make sure that my children know that I'm there for them.
Yeah.
Is that too much?
No, it's not too much. No. I think making sure you're really emotionally available to your children is really important. Like that's something that I try to do. And I suppose even though I talked about having a really good relationship with my dad, maybe I don't feel like we were that much of like an emotional family. Like I don't think like I'd feel really awkward saying to my mum and dad now as an adult, like I love you, like because that was just not something not a way that we would communicate when I was young. Whereas I am quite like that with the kids. Like I am quite loving and emotionally available. And then I suppose feeling like the scales have fallen from my eyes regarding masculinity, like just seeing these kind of masculine tropes and just thinking they're kind of nonsense. Like obviously there's been a public conversation about the manosphere and Andrew Tate and all that kind of stuff, and I was already very aware of all that. I'm quite interested in it, actually, so I knew all that stuff was going on anyway, and I do think it's like total BS, and I find it really quite cringe and embarrassing. A lot of that stuff, it's like they're just like little boys like pretending, so I kind of find it a bit embarrassing. So but anyway, in the sense that I felt that the scales have fallen from my eyes with regard to masculinity, it was like, well, let's try and raise Robin and my younger boy in a way where it's like there is no, almost like they don't have this concept of masculinity. So we try to avoid like clothes and games that are very, very masculine. Obviously, a lot of the clothes that you buy for children can be very gendered, so they can have superheroes on. A lot of the toys that you can buy are like guns and things. And I think that for Imogen and I, that was a big part of it. Like so much of stuff which is for boys when they're kids can be tied to violence, like superheroes, guns, and we kind of wanted to avoid that as much as we can. Like maybe we'll come on to talk about this. What you find out as you raise children is just really hard to avoid that stuff. But yeah, that was kind of something we were thinking about. And just maybe try and break this idea of toxic masculinity if we can play our part in raising boys who understand like how to treat each other without being violent, how to respect women, etc. We would feel that was like mission accomplished.
It's bizarre how gendered society is.
Yeah,
it's like this is for girls, this is for boys, and it's absolute nonsense. Both boys and girls can enjoy whatever in our house, and it's interesting. We kind of let Forrest choose his clothes to a certain extent, and there was a time when he saw, I think it was actually in the girls section, but it was like a red shirt and it had little like raspberries on, little pink raspberries with little cute faces, and he was like, oh, I love that. And we're like, okay, like we'll get you this. Like we don't often get him like new clothes, we get him like secondhand stuff, but this was one that he loved. I was like, okay, we'll get you this. He loved it, and then he went to this holiday club, and he came home at lunchtime because he was upset, and we were trying to figure out what was wrong with him, and he was like, the teacher said I was a girl, or thought I was a girl, and then all the other children said I was a girl. And I was like, that's so sad.
Yeah.
And we tried to talk to him about it, and yeah, it's just things like that happen and do happen.
Yeah.
He doesn't look like a girl, by the way. It's just interesting.
Yeah, we used to find the same with Robin. Robin loves wearing leggings, so he's not so. Now he started school, he's not so bothered. But he would only wear leggings, and he'd get upset if you'd put him in anything else. And also for a while he had long hair, and people would think he was a girl a lot. And I thought it was really funny because he doesn't particularly look like a girl otherwise. So it's just like often those very visual markers, people will just take those and quickly make an assumption about whether your kid's a boy or a girl. But we've never had an instance where it's upset Robin. He's just usually shrugged it off. So yeah, poor Forrest. Right. So should we come on to how we feed our kids?
Yes.
So we both follow a vegan diet.
Yeah.
I know that. Well, we don't completely. So Robin doesn't completely follow a diet. We can come on to talk about that, and I don't think Forrest does either, does he?
No.
So some people will question whether it's okay to raise children on a vegan diet. The British Dietetic Association have said that a carefully planned plant-based diet can support healthy living at every age and life stage. So they clearly think so, and they are the experts. I'll talk about Robin first, shall I? So, we did raise Robin vegan for a few years, maybe till he was like 2 or 3, and I know a lot of people come into difficulties when they first send their kids to nursery. That wasn't really a problem for us. So when we sent Robin to nursery, his nursery workers were really supportive, actually, and he was assigned a key worker who happened to be vegan herself. So I remember when we went for the visit, that was really positive, because we said, "Oh, well, he's vegan," and she said, "Oh, I'll remember that and look out for him because I'm vegan too." So that we found that really positive. I think where we started to run into difficulties was Robin just hit an age where he became a really picky eater, and particularly then when you're out and about, like the Venn diagram of stuff that he will eat and stuff that is vegan is like so narrow. We found it really, really hard to always find things that he would eat that were vegan. And we're like not very organized parents, so we're not very good at like preparing lunches to take out. It's just not always really practical to do that anyway. So yeah, once he hit that sort of age, we did start just letting him eat things that were vegetarian, and we're kind of happy about that. Now he started school, he's 5. We decided not to ask school to provide him with vegan food and just to let him go and take the vegetarian option. So yeah, that's how we do it. So basically he's vegan pretty much when he's at home, and then when we're out and about, if we can find him things that he'll eat that are vegan, then great. Like he loves beans on toast, and that's something you can get nearly everywhere. So we find that works quite well. But yeah, for us, if it just isn't practical in that particular moment, we will give him cheese or, crisps with milk powder in, all that kind of thing. How about you with Forrest?
Yeah, so our household agrees that we shouldn't eat animals because we love them and we care for them. So that's quite easy. Forrest is on board with that. He loves it. But yeah, my wife goes for a while being vegan, but sometimes she's vegetarian. So it's like she's not as strict as I am with food. So I'm like, vegan is it? Like that's all I can eat. It's easier for me to make that distinction between what I do and don't eat. But she's a bit more flexible. So yeah, as we started taking Forrest out to have meals, if there is like a kid's pizza, he likes that. And he does sometimes have the vegetarian option, but often I find restaurants do have a kid's vegan option, which is really refreshing. But it often is just tomato pasta.
Yeah.
And there are days when Forrest doesn't want tomato pasta, and that's the tricky thing, because kids do develop preferences at different times, and they're very loud about it, and they're very strong-minded. So it's you have to accommodate them, and I really respect people who do have a completely vegan family, because you will have to be more prepared. You'll have to give more options and spend more time. And when you've got like a newborn, like we have ish, it gets really difficult to prepare things and just have the time to even plan ahead.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, it's much harder to say to a kid, you've got to have the tomato pasta because it's the only thing. Like they find that quite hard to get their head around. What about like talking to the kids about how animals are farmed and like the issues? How do you talk to them?
So Forrest is 4, so he doesn't really understand the issues with farming yet, and I think he is still exposed to a lot of the what do you call it, farm washing, where like it was really positive farming images, and it's just like, I don't want to challenge his perception at the moment, but I talk to him about the fact that other people do eat animals, and he will say, why? And I'll say, well, just because other people do that, that's what they've learned to do. But we love animals and we care for them, so we don't want to eat them. And I just try and articulate it in a compassionate way, and he is on board with that. And there was actually a really cute moment last night. We were in a local supermarket walking past the frozen section, and he pointed at some fish fingers and he's like, "Daddy, is there fish in there?" And I was like, "Yeah, that's got fish in." It was like, "Oh, okay, we'll get something else then." And so he understands that there is
cute.
food that has animals in, but we don't have that food.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, it's quite similar, really. So, I agree with the farm washing thing's interesting. So now I mentioned it on a previous episode of the podcast, but now that Robin started school, they have actually done like a whole term where animals on farms has been like a subject that they've returned to over and over again, and they've had people come in and bring farm animals for them to pet and be introduced to. So it is really funny how you approach it, because Robin will come home and he'll start spitting out facts at me about how eggs, how long chicks are in eggs and how they get put in the incubator and all that, and you feel like you feel like you want to say some real truths about what happens to chickens on most farms, but obviously you kind of aware that he's not ready to hear that yet. So yeah, for us it's really about, we sort of say, well, we don't eat animals because to eat animals you have to kill animals, and we don't want to kill animals. And I think he understands that and he agrees with it. And then, the conversations around cheese and milk and other things are a bit more difficult to have, because obviously it's really clear with meat that you are eating part of a dead animal, whereas it's not so clear with cheese and milk. But Robin, he kind of has adopted quite nicely this persona of being a vegan. Like, he's quite proud of it, and he will say, "I'm a vegan." I mean, he doesn't really know that he's not, so that's quite cute. And if people offer him food, he will say, "Does it have milk in it?" He gets offered chocolates and stuff like that. So he sort of understands it very well, and he's quite proud of it, I would say. I suppose the social aspect is another thing. So there are kids in his year who might have birthday parties at like farms with petting zoos. Like, that's something we've come across. And then also like things like going to birthday parties and everyone being able to have birthday cake are other issues that you kind of have to confront when you're a parent. So I think our approach is like, we don't want Robin to feel like because we are vegan, he can't do stuff. Because I think that would make him feel like it was a real barrier. So I think our approach is, again, similar to the eating vegetarian when we're out and about. If he gets offered some cake or some food at a party, then we're happy for him to have it, even if it isn't vegan. And if we get invited to like an event at a petting zoo or that kind of thing, or a zoo or an aquarium, he actually really loves fish, so he likes going to the aquarium. We try to still do it so that he feels like he gets that, the same experiences that other people his age have. But maybe also try to talk to him about, how do you feel about the fact that there are animals in cages, and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that really resonates with me, because I feel like we have an easy get out because my wife isn't strictly vegan. So from her perspective, yes, he can have birthday cake. Yes, he can have chocolate with milk in. Whereas if it was up to me, I'd be like, no. So I'd be more hardline. But it means that he doesn't get left out as much. And the interesting thing is gelatin. It's in so many things, but we've managed to kind of get by that as well. Like, his nursery workers know that he's vegetarian, so they don't give him any of the typical sweets, but they often will give him like a little milk chocolate Freddo bar instead. So like they have another option for him, which is good. It'd be better if it was vegan. But we have that shortcut, I guess, by being a bit more lenient with what he's exposed to, which should benefit him and make him feel more included and less of a outcast.
What about what you eat as a parent? Like, you mentioned how having a young kid and then a baby is a real pressure on your time. What's your diet like at the moment?
Pretty bad. Yeah, we, at Veganuary, we want to promote like a healthy plant-based diet, and I feel a bit embarrassed saying this sort of thing, but when you've got a baby that's a few months old and you've not had much sleep in the night, and then you're working a full day, and then your 4-year-old is going, Dad, I'm hungry, Dad, I'm hungry. Your options are put something in the oven, vegan dippers, skin on chips, and like some peas and carrots. It's so like conventional. It's the conventional meal that I was brought up on, but veganized, and it's not very healthy. But so yeah, there'll be days like that, and then maybe the following day we'll be like, oh, that wasn't the best idea. So we'll try and give like a more balanced meal with like a hummus salad with veg sticks. But yeah, a lot of ultra processed foods in our house at the moment, and it's funny because in previous years I really tried to avoid them, but something has got to give when you're trying to be productive, proactive in your life and raising your children well. I think diet takes a hit, and it will take a hit. Not only cost, because like good quality ingredients is economically expensive, but also a cost in time, which parents don't have. So yeah, my diet isn't as good as it could be, but we're all alive and we're doing all right. How about you, Stu?
That is like a real win. We're very much the same, and I think this is one reason why people getting really judgmental about eating processed foods kind of gets my goat a little bit, because like you say, it was so normal when we were kids to have fish fingers and beans or something for a dinner, and no one batted an eyelid. And the minute you say that you give your kids like vegan fish fingers, or people get on their high horses about ultra processed food. But for us, it isn't just a time and convenience thing. It's like this issue that he's a very picky eater, and I'm sure like many parents who are listening will have experienced this as well. Like children are very picky eaters often. So we try to give Robin things like tofu occasionally to get him used to that, and he quite likes the tofu brand, the smoked tofu. But yeah, we're kind of like he has an evening meal at nursery on a Monday and Tuesday, and then the rest of the week it's like we've got very set meals. Like we eat the same thing every Wednesday, the same thing every Thursday, and like processed foods are like quite a big part of that. Something with Robin is he hates a meal where it's like all mixed together with a sauce, like a curry or a casserole, or something like that, a bolognese or a chili. He just really does not like that at all. He likes his meals to be something protein there, and then some vegetables there, and then maybe some potatoes there, that kind of thing. So everything very separate. And if you're eating like that, it's then very hard to find a protein source that is like really healthy. If you won't eat tofu, fried tofu, like before we had kids, a lot of our meals would be those kind of things like curries and chilies and casseroles, and that was what we liked eating. So now that's a bit of a battle, really.
There was a really good tip that I heard somewhere to like theme a meal to get them to try new things. Have you heard that?
No.
So there's this picture of me and my wife on a honeymoon in Japan, and Forrest loves it. He's always picking it up and being like, oh, I want to go here. So I was like, I want him to eat some tofu. So I was like, Forrest, tonight we're going to eat a meal from Japan, from here. And it's got this delicious, like, fluffy tofu in, it's got noodles, and it's got all these things. And we just got him excited about it.
Oh, nice.
And then he kind of helped cook it a little bit. And he ate it all. He loved the tofu. And it just really worked with switching him onto tofu, because until then, he wasn't into tofu. So, yeah, I think theming a meal for a child is pretty powerful.
That's very impressive. It reminds me of a time when a couple of years ago there was loads of wild garlic growing in our local park, and I said to Robin, should we go and pick some wild garlic and then make a meal out of it? And he was really excited about this. So we went to the park, we picked the wild garlic, we washed it together, we blended it into a pesto together, we made the pasta, I dished it up. He had one taste, he was like, I'm not going to eat that. That didn't work for me.
Yeah.
All right. Well, should we move on to talking about meat eating and masculinity?
It's a big one.
So, who follows a vegan diet? We think it's probably far more women following a vegan diet than men. So, the Veganuary participant survey that we did after January this year found that 85% of those who took part were female and 14% were male. I've also been we've both been looking at a study that the Vegan Society published, which is called Masculinity and Veganism. Although we feel like we might have looked at different publishing dates of this. I don't know you've looked at one from 2024.
Yeah.
Mine is by Lorna Fenwick McLaren and Alexander Huntley. Is that the same as you? I wonder if yours is just a later edition. Anyway.
So yeah, the one I was looking at, I've looked at the one you looked at, but I've also been looking at one that was published by the Vegan Society.
Well, anyway, they cite the fact that there's about 2 to 3%, I think, of the UK population that follow a vegan diet, but the majority of those are women rather than men. They talk about the fact that masculinity is precarious and needs to be proved and maintained, which is something we've both we've talked about how we've felt that in our lives. So men who are concerned about masculinity avoid behaviours that might be interpreted as unmasculine. And there is this strong association between meat and masculinity. Meat seems to represent like strength, high performance, dominance over other species. Yeah, can you think of any other instances of cultural associations between meat and masculinity?
Well, there's barbecues somehow.
Barbecues, yes,
Yeah.
an important male activity.
Fire, meat.
Yeah, absolutely. And then they cite several studies that have been conducted about attitudes to vegan and vegetarian diets, which have shown that vegetarian and vegan diets are often perceived as more feminized. And studies have also shown that when a man chooses to abstain from meat eating, it can induce a negative response from meat eaters who view the act as a gender role violation.
That's harsh.
Very harsh. You see, this says a lot about me, probably, and my attitude to masculinity. But I think the idea of a gender role violation sounds like something I'd definitely be drawn to.
Yeah, it's funny. We kind of need like an uber manly man with us, don't we? Because we both kind of challenge this notion of masculinity, I guess, in how we act.
Yeah, but then this study also says that most vegan men are likely to reject gender expectations.
Yeah.
So, what came first, the chicken or the egg? There should be a better metaphor for that, a vegan one. Do you know what came first, the avocado or the stone? Yes, men feel social stigma because meat eating is a core aspect of how masculinity is performed. And that's interesting. That reminded me of the fact that in the Veganuary survey, we asked people what they found challenging about trying a vegan diet, and 20% said that dealing with friends and family was the biggest challenge. I think that was the second most common reason cited. So this idea of like fearing stigma is really a big barrier often to trying veganism, and perhaps that's more pronounced in men. And then, misinformation on nutrition. We could talk a bit about this. Protein and soy. I think this is an interesting thing about how often vegan diets are targeted to men. It's often like very gym focused and like, look, I'm vegan and I can still pull a truck along by a rope, and I can, because I get loads of protein from beans.
Well, it's like vegans feel like they need to prove the manliness or masculinity, which is it's a shame. But yeah, we're a tribal species, aren't we? We evolved to fit into groups, and we don't want to upset that, which is why I think men will feel judged if they're not doing the conventional thing. So yeah, we need to find a way to make them feel less judged. Yeah. And
then the final point from the study was that men are more likely than women to consider meat eating natural. Again, that made me think. We were talking about gendered clothing and things for boys, and I was thinking about how if you have animals on clothing for girls, it's often rabbits and mice and birds. And if you have clothing on things for boys, it's alligators and lions and tigers. And then you were talking about how Forrest was drawn to that top that had raspberries on.
Yeah.
And isn't that funny that, like, how common it is to see things like strawberries, like fruit, on girls' clothing, but not so much on men. And I wonder how much that feeds into this idea that meat eating is more natural in men than in women.
I think there are so many touch points in society which multiply that ideology. Yeah, so many areas that prioritize the depiction of men in one domain and women in the other domain.
So, should we talk about the cultural barriers to veganism for men? So, why do you think it is that that meat is so marketed as manly? What do you think is the connection between meat and masculinity?
I think it's culture. It's how men are portrayed in the media and how they have been over the past 100 years. There was a really interesting point in that the Vegan Society study that I was looking at that found that there's a need for more male vegan role models, and that they're not seeing a good example of what a vegan male could be. And there's one funny comment where a respondent to their study said, "I'm not listening to Bill Gates." And it just made me really think that we need more like down-to-earth vegan men, because men don't want to listen to, I don't know, tech gurus or wealthy individuals. We need more visible working class vegan men.
Yeah, that's interesting. Who can you think of that are like good male role? I suppose maybe Chris Packham.
Yeah, he's a good one.
Dale Vince.
Yeah, we have some.
What about how plant-based foods are often feminized in the media? So how much do you know about soy boys?
A little bit. Please go on.
I got quite obsessed with this after I heard a podcast episode all about soy boys. So there was a Men's Health article about 20 years ago, that talked about how soy is really, really bad for men's health. And this seems to have come from the fact that soya is high in estrogen. But what it's actually high in is plant estrogen, which is very different to the estrogen that is in the human body. And so this kind of started a myth that eating lots of tofu and other soya products will lower your testosterone and increase your estrogen in your body. Lots of people, there's kind of this myth that if you eat lots of tofu, you'll grow boobs if you're a man. It's been widely debunked. We've had nutrition experts on this podcast talking about how it's absolute nonsense. It doesn't raise the amount of estrogen in your body. You won't grow boobs if you eat lots of tofu. But the kind of myth still prevails, and now it's been kind of adopted by the alt-right, particularly online. So this kind of idea of a soy boy is a way to talk about anyone that is more liberal, that is more progressive on the left, particularly people that men who might align themselves with women's rights and feminism. They're kind of seen as weak. There's a particular image, like a meme image of a drawing of a man who like has a scraggly beard and he's got like tired eyes and a weak, sort of pathetic man who aligns himself with feminism would be seen as a soy boy. So there's this really interesting adoption of like, if you're vegan or vegetarian, you are kind of a beta male, which is very interesting.
It is interesting, and it's a bit sad. Again, another thing that it's men that are so averse to the idea of femininity that they probably are missing out on some beautiful aspects of life.
Yeah, it also shows how kind of fragile this notion of masculinity is. That if you feel like by eating some tofu, it's going to completely bring down the whole structure of masculinity, and turn you into a soy boy, a kind of feminized man. Like, how fragile must you consider masculinity to be? And I mean, it must be hard to live with that kind of worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, how precarious are these people's identities? You know, that's it's a weird one.
Yeah,
but I don't want to judge. You know, people are living with all sorts of challenges. But they should try vegan.
How do you think we can challenge this traditional notion of masculine eating? How can we get around this idea that men shouldn't be vegan or men can't be vegan? Do you have any thoughts?
I think we need to be present in communities more. I think we live in a world where people are insulated in their own little bubbles, and this is how things like the manosphere blossom. It's because it's like these echo chambers where these ideas percolate and they build in intensity, and they don't see normal everyday people trying different things, trying a vegan diet. So one thing we could do is try and talk to more people, and not say, hi, I'm vegan. Talk to them a little bit, and it might come up, and then if they see you choosing the vegan option or having an oat milk in your drink, there are opportunities to kind of be visible and make it normal and show that, yeah, it isn't so weird. It isn't it, and it doesn't have to be weird.
Well, there's been a lot of campaigning around sports nutrition, and I suppose it was really triggered by the release of the Game Changers film on Netflix. So I think this was really a way to try and redefine masculinity in vegan diets, and they highlighted like a number of athletes who have like one stuff performed really well while following a vegan diet. And now I can't remember exactly who's in it. I think Djokovic is in it, Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think. There's the German weightlifter who's called Patrick Baboumian, I think it is. Baboumian, yeah. You had another example, didn't you, of a vegan runner?
Yeah, so I've got a bit obsessed with like ultra marathons recently, like really insane feats of like perseverance. And yeah, in 2023 there was an ultra runner called Harvey Lewis, and he set a record at the Big Dog's Backyard Ultra. So I just need to give a bit of a context here. So these backdoor ultras, they run 4.167 miles every hour on the hour. So the thinking in that is over 24 hours, that's 100 miles. So they'll run this 4-ish miles, have enough time to have a break, have a snack, and then on the hour they do the next loop. So Harvey Lewis, he clocked up 450 miles. So that was, I think it was like 4.5 days of running. And often some of them will have like a 10-minute nap if they have time for it, but a lot of them just stay awake for this amount of time. And yeah, he did it all on a vegan diet. And it's just incredible. And there are other kind of like long distance vegan runners that seem to find that plant-based will fuel them for longer. So inspiring and just kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, I think the research behind that, why more sports people are adopting vegan diets, is it's supposed to improve your performance and also aid your recovery. So yeah, I think a lot of coaches are recommending vegan diets to sports people now, and there have been a number of examples. But yeah, that example is mad. The kind of discipline to do that as well sort of blows my mind.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that I suggested we do this podcast is that on Mother's Day, you see a lot of vegan groups talking about the relationship of say, mother cows and mother calves, and really appealing to women who are mothers by kind of showing the relationship, how the relationship between a cow and a calf can be similar to the relationship between a human mother and a human child. And I've heard women who are vegan talk to me before about how that really resonates with them, and I think that's quite interesting. I think we maybe haven't seen any vegan groups yet try and do something that appeals to men in the same way and appeals to that kind of caring and nurturing feeling that you adopt when you become a father. I think is a really interesting approach, perhaps. I feel that becoming a father did sort of cement my belief in veganism in a way. And, you know, something I've really noticed since becoming a dad is how hard I find it to watch horror films and things that have like very violent. I used to love horror films, but now, especially if I see like a film where someone is getting beaten up, I find that really, really hard to watch. And I think my tolerance for like violence on screen has really changed. I find it really difficult to kind of accept that we live in a violent world now. And I think that's something that's really resonated with my beliefs in following a plant-based diet, because it's something to do with how precious and fragile a young child can feel. You know, when you're holding them in your arms, and you get these weird flashes of like strange visions you have of like dropping your child and how awful it would feel if they like cracked their head open on the floor and things like that. And I think I've become very aware of how fragile and kind of precarious the human body feels. And that to me relates to how we treat animals as well. Like the idea that we would then inflict that similar kind of damage on animals, I find quite disturbing and upsetting now. Like I probably went vegan originally more for environmental reasons, but I think now that I've got kids, I do worry more about how animals and people suffer violence in the world. You've told me that you feel like you had a similar that you kind of became more vegan after becoming a dad, right?
Yeah, so I actually became vegan after becoming a dad, and I think becoming a parent makes you more empathic, or I suspect that it does. So yeah, I was already reducing everything over like a few years, and when Forrest was born, I was vegetarian. This might be a bit personal, but it was quite traumatic for us as a family. Like we had to have like a regimented feeding plan, which isn't uncommon. Like often they want the baby to put on weight straight away. So we're all super sleep deprived, caused a lot of anxiety. Yeah. And then you kind of reframe that in that, you know, this challenge of feeding the young is what is creating the milk industry. So there's a little link there. I'd already stopped drinking milk at that point because I just thought it was weird anyway before I went vegan. And then seeing the suffering in my family, you kind of I just made a link between that and other animals and how we exploit that. So there was definitely some connections being made. But yeah, like when Forrest was a baby, I would go on walks with him in the baby carrier every day in the woods and have time to think. And just, you know, one day, one of my friends said, could you actually go vegan? Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I could. And it was just like that realization, like all the pieces fell together. So yeah, I've been vegan, pretty much the same amount of time that my son's been alive, which is kind of nice. But yeah, it really kind of opened my eyes and led me to learn more about the impact to animals.
I think something else is I think inevitably you talk to your children about looking after animals. So, you know, we had until very recently, we had a dog as part of our family. And obviously you talk to the children about, well, we don't hit the dog, we're gentle with the dog, we don't scare the dog, and similar with when you're out and about and you see animals. If you see a cat in the street, well, you want to approach very slowly and gently so as not to scare the cat, etc. And I think that can make you quite aware of the cognitive dissonance between, like, that is how we treat animals who are our pets or who are out in our neighborhood or in nature, but as a society, we have a very different attitude to pets who we eat for food. So I think it really brings that into relief as well when you become a parent. So yeah, I think maybe there's something in talking more to fathers. There's also the question about the environment and how much you want to make sure that we have a healthy planet for our next generation to inherit. So I feel that very strongly.
Yeah, same. That was a massive decision maker, because when you have a child, you start thinking they're going to be hopefully alive for longer than I am. And look at the mess we're in. So it's like, for me, it was like everything that I could do to try and make a better world for my child became very important to me. So veganism was it was a key way, I think.
Good. I think that kind of rounds up our discussion on masculinity. I think it's worth just citing, and I noticed they did that in the Vegan Society study as well. I suppose we've really talked today about like a very perhaps a narrow view of masculinity, which is like a white Western masculinity, and we are both cis men. So I suppose it might just be worth noting, like, that maybe there are other forms of masculinity that we haven't touched on, probably because we're not so well versed on those. So, there are men that aren't cis, there are people that aren't white that might experience masculinity in a very different way. So I suppose we've chosen, it's been quite subjective in our experience.
And very, I guess, working class British.
Yes.
And that's that's one lens that you can view masculinity through that won't connect to other people.
Yes. So what about, I wanted to ask you if there are any vegan foods that Forrest eat that's quite a surprise, unusual, or things that you were surprised that he liked.
Yeah, so early on I was really surprised that he loved anything pickled. So pickled gherkin, like pickled cabbage, that sort of thing. He just seemed to love the tang, and relate to that, he likes lemons being squeezed in his mouth, and I don't want to do it often because it's bad for your teeth, but he'll just, can I have a squirt of lemon? But yeah, back to the pickles, thinking more about gut health, I started getting like fermented food like sauerkraut, and first Forrest was resistant because it looked a bit weird, and I was just like, Forrest, this is pickles, and then so now he's just like totally switched on to sauerkraut, which is great.
Did you do baby-led weaning?
Yeah.
So baby-led weaning is basically where you put loads of different foods in front of them and you just let them explore and feel the textures and taste what they want and see what they like. So yeah, we did that as well. And I think that's really interesting because I think our parents' generation were kind of taught babies just like really bland, mushy food. So it's just like mushed up banana, mushed up sweet potato, I don't know. But now the kind of thinking is, well, you should expose your child to as many flavors and experiences as you possibly can. So yeah, it was surprising to us as well that Robin liked stuff that is pickled, like those really strong flavors. He also really likes lemon. Sometimes he'll just say to me, could I have a slice of lemon? So he's there sucking away at a slice of lemon. The other day he was playing out in the street with our neighbours' kids and he was just like handing out slices of lemons to everyone. Do you want a slice of lemon? That was quite funny. Robin loves an olive. He loves salty food, so that's something we've got to keep in check. He calls them Olivers, and he likes sriracha sauce. Spicy sriracha sauce.
Oh, does he?
Yeah, but he likes it, but then he will get carried away. So we'll give him a little bit of sriracha sauce, and he'll have like a little dip, and he'll eat that. That's nice, and then he'll get a bit of pasta and he'll just completely smother it in sriracha sauce, and then he'll eat that, and then he'll be like, eyes watering and everything. So
that's so good though that he'll eat spicy things, because Forrest is not into spicy things, and it's like you want to make a nice chili and you can't really have a kick for Forrest.
No.
So yeah, that's a shame.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about was whether you've had any funny run-ins with the manosphere.
I haven't really, but I want you to tell me yours because you'll have something amazing.
Well, I do see quite a lot of. I don't know why. I think if you're on social media, then if you find something funny, even if you disagree with it, you'll stop and read it, and then it just serves you more and more of that stuff. So I think because I find this whole stuff from the manosphere quite sort of morbidly entertaining, I do see quite a lot of it. And the thing that I like has blown my mind recently is that there is a subsect of men in this manosphere space who don't wipe their bums because they see touching their bums, even if it's their own bum, as like a bit gay.
It's absolutely bizarre.
So there's just men wandering around who don't wipe the bottoms. But one thing that I saw recently that really made me laugh was it was like a meme, and it was reasons not to wipe your bottom. It was like it saves time. You've got things to do. You've got Bitcoin to buy, and then one of them was lions don't wipe. So it's a way to be more like a lion.
That's the whole of that hour of conversation. That's crazy.
Yeah. Good. Well, I think that just what a great note to end on. That just about sums up our discussion on masculinity and veganism and fatherhood. We'd be interested to hear if you have any thoughts on this. If you have any thoughts, particularly on how we can try and crack this and convince more men to try vegan, it'd be lovely to hear from you. You can email us at podcast@veganuary.com. All right, that just about rounds up our chat on masculinity, fatherhood, and veganism. Thanks, Andrew, for coming into the studio today to talk to me. It's been really nice.
Thanks very much, Stu. Always lovely to see you.
So much fun to have someone here in the flesh.
Oh, the real world, real people.
Yes. So we'd love to hear from you. If you have any thoughts about this podcast, this subject, masculinity, veganism, fatherhood, how we can try and get more men to try vegan, we'd love you to email us at podcast@veganuary.com. You can also find Veganuary on all the major social channels. If you'd like to take part in Veganuary, you can visit veganuary.com and opt in to receive our 31 days of coaching emails. We only ask you to share your name, country, and email address, and you don't have to wait until January to do it. You can do it any time of year. You choose whatever start date you want. This podcast was recorded at Distorted Podcast Studios and produced by Jim Moore at Bloody Vegan Productions. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe and rate us 5 stars. Bye.
1,